The sun had barely set over the small village of Nyanga when the news spread like wildfire. Two young girls, Amina and Kesi, were found lifeless near the river, their bodies covered in bruises. The village was in mourning, but mourning soon turned into rage when an old woman claimed to have seen a shadowy figure lurking near the riverbank. Within hours, whispers turned into accusations, and all fingers pointed at Obinna, a 16-year-old boy known for his quiet nature and sharp intellect. He was an outsider. His mother had moved to Nyanga after escaping her troubled past, and many never truly accepted them. Obinna swore his innocence, but the village was deaf to his pleas. Fear and grief clouded their judgment. The elders called for a swift trial, and within days, the young boy was found guilty. His punishment? Death by electrocution. On the day of his execution, the rain fell heavily, as if the heavens themselves were weeping. Obinna stood in the rusted metal chair, his wrists strapped down, his heart pounding. "I am innocent," he whispered. The priest made the sign of the cross. The executioner pulled the switch. The room filled with the sound of crackling electricity. Obinna's body convulsed violently, and then silence. Nyanga moved on. The real killer, they believed, had paid for his crime. But the truth had not died with Obinna. Years passed. Amina and Kesi's families tried to heal, but then something changed. A man named Jabari, a former drifter, was arrested in a neighboring town for an unrelated crime. In his drunken confession, he mumbled something chilling. "Those two girls by the river, I never thought they'd blame the boy." The room froze. The officer, an old man from Nyanga, felt his blood turn cold. He demanded more details, and as Jabari spoke, piece by piece, the truth unraveled. Obinna was innocent. Nyanga was in chaos. The elders, the villagers, the same people who had demanded Obinna's execution, now lived with unbearable guilt. His mother, now frail and broken, could only sit in silence, staring at the spot where her son had once played. A public announcement was made. Obinna was exonerated. But what did it matter? The boy was already dead. A statue was built in his honor, a way for Nyanga to cleanse itself of its sins. But justice had come too late. That night, the wind howled through the village, whispering a name that would never be forgotten. Guilt hung over Nyanga like a permanent fog. The village elders tried to move forward, but the whispers never stopped. People spoke in hushed tones about the injustice, about Obinna's mother, Mama Ife, who had become a ghost of herself. Some claimed she roamed the village at night, standing by the river where her son had been accused of a crime he never committed. But something else was happening. Strange things. Fishermen swore they heard a boy's voice calling from the riverbanks. Some villagers claimed to see a shadow moving through the trees, vanishing before they could get a clear look. And then there was the execution room, the place where Obinna had been electrocuted. The guards who worked there began quitting. One said he heard a deep humming sound, like electricity sparking, but the power was off. Another swore the lights flickered whenever he walked by. Obinna was gone. But was he really? Jabari, the true murderer, sat in a cold prison cell miles away. But sleep never came easy. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Obinna, his dark, piercing eyes staring through him. One night, Jabari jolted awake, drenched in sweat. His cell door was open. The guards were nowhere in sight. He stepped out hesitantly. The hallway was empty, but he could hear something. A soft crackling sound, like electricity buzzing. Then he heard it. "You let me die for what you did." Jabari's breath caught in his throat. His knees buckled as he turned to see a shadow standing at the end of the hall. It had no face, no features, just two glowing, electric blue eyes. "I'm not done with you." Jabari let out a scream that echoed through the prison. The next morning, he was found curled in a corner, muttering Obinna's name over and over again. News of Jabari's mental breakdown reached Nyanga. The elders gathered, fear tightening their throats. The village had tried to atone, but could one truly atone for such a crime? Mama Ife, who had remained silent for years, finally spoke. She stood before the village, her voice steady, her eyes dark with sorrow. You cannot bury the truth. It will always return. That night, the sky above Nyanga was restless. Lightning flashed, though there was no storm. The villagers locked their doors, whispering prayers to keep away the restless soul of the boy they had betrayed. And in the dead of night, near the river where it had all begun, a soft voice drifted through the trees. I was innocent. The boy who died twice had returned. Nyanga was no longer the village it once was. Ever since the truth of Obinna's innocence was revealed, the land seemed different. The river that once shimmered in the moonlight now ran murky, its waters colder than ice. Crops withered before their time, animals refused to drink from the well, and at night, a strange flickering glow could be seen from the old execution chamber. The villagers had started calling it the curse of Obinna. No one spoke of it openly, but fear hung in their eyes. The elders, the very ones who had sentenced an innocent boy to death, began falling ill, one after another. Some swore they saw Obinna's shadow standing outside their homes before they collapsed, writhing in pain. Mama Eve, now frail but still standing, watched it all in silence. She did not weep, nor did she rejoice. But deep inside she knew justice was not yet finished. Despite the fear that gripped the village, a few brave men decided to investigate the execution room, where the strange lights had been seen flickering at night. Led by Aid, the son of one of the elders, they carried torches and machetes, convinced they could put an end to whatever haunted the place. The moment they stepped inside, the air turned heavy, thick with something unseen. The walls were damp, and the old rusted chair where Obinna had died sat in the center of the room, untouched. Then the torches flickered, a low hum filled the air, and suddenly the room was flooded with blinding blue light. The men screamed as the chair shook violently, sparks of electricity dancing across its surface, and then, from the shadows, they saw him, Obinna. His body was cloaked in darkness, his eyes glowing with the same electric blue light that had filled the room. But it wasn't just Obinna. Behind him, two more figures stood, Amina and Kesi, the very girls he had been accused of killing. "You killed me," Obinna whispered, his voice crackling like lightning. Aid fell to his knees, his heart hammering in his chest. The dead had returned. The next day, Aid ran to the village square, his voice shaking as he told everyone what he had seen. "Obinna is still here. He will not leave until justice is complete." The elders, now weak with illness, had no choice but to confess. That day, they revealed the dark secret they had kept hidden for years. Obinna had not been given a fair trial. They had known there was no true evidence against him, but the village had demanded a scapegoat. They had chosen to kill him rather than seek the truth. Mama Ife stood before them, tears streaming down her face. "And now you will pay." That night, as the village prepared a ritual to finally lay Obinna's soul to rest, a final scream tore through the darknesses. It was Jabari. He had died in his prison cell, his body burned from the inside out, as if struck by a bolt of lightning. And just like that, the flickering lights in Nyanga stopped. The river turned clear once more. The crops flourished again. The curse was lifted. Years passed, and Nyanga slowly healed. A statue of Obinna was built in the center of the village, standing tall for generations to come. Some say that on certain nights, when the moon is high, a faint electric hum can still be heard in the distance. But this time, it is not a sound of vengeance. It is a reminder that the dead never stay silent, and that the truth will always find its way home.